So I was just watching Jordan Peterson. It's actually an excerpt from a much larger, I believe this is the debate that he was having with a lawyer whose name I can't think of the lawyer's name. But anyways, they debate this new law, this new transgender pronoun use law that's supposed to be in effect or supposedly taking effect in Canada. I don't know. Anyways, I haven't seen the whole debate, but I was looking at this excerpt and um, it's a Q&A section where one of the students asks about I guess trying to draw a distinction between um, the use of the pronouns and so these these new uh, genders specific pronouns that are supposed to be introduced into the English lexicon in order to help to um, identify some of the more complex gender identities that are out there. And I guess the question is in and around, sort of how does, for instance, pronoun use differ from adjective, using sort of say derogatory language. Anyways, it's a bit of a dense question. I don't mean dense stupid. I mean dense like it's very packed. It's packed with a lot of suppositions. The question, anyways, in his response, Jordan Peterson um, makes mention of uh, respect, basically saying along the lines of, you can't really force somebody to respect you, and as you know, and I think saying, I guess, in a roundabout way, what he's saying is that the use of the pronouns, or even adjectives, like if we're just thinking about using derogatory language onto itself, you can't really force people to be respectful, right, or respect you. Like that's not really how human interaction works, and that may be true. Um, you certainly can't, uh, you can't go around expecting people to like you or expecting people to respect you. That may be true. Now, but as I'm thinking about respect, we think about what kind of society we're aiming for, what kind of society we like to nurture. I think respect is not that. Um, I don't think it's that's like the way that he sort of makes it seem is as though respect is a very high bar. Like like this really high bar that would otherwise be you know uh, unattainable on a day-to-day basis, like it's like this far reaching, like it's too lofty an idea to expect somebody to respect you. Now, I think he's coming at it from a very pragmatic point of view. And I think also from the perspective of this is not, you can't really legislate attitudes. Okay. Now, mm, I don't know if I agree with that. And like so, not to say that I think you can or should legislate attitudes. I'm not crazy, but I do think that that's, to me, the premise of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have do unto you. To me, is a basic level of respect that one can try to foster, in a day to day life. You know, um, so and I don't think that that's, it's not about, some extreme amount of reverence for a given stranger, so much as it is from situation to situation. You look at the situation from the point of view of, well, how would I like somebody to respond to me, or how, and you judge it based on that criteria, and you act according to that constraint, right? I don't think that that's asking too much of people. I think it's really straightforward, and it's really sort of common sense, in terms of how we can think about respect. I mean, can you legislate that? Obviously not. But I also don't think that it's strange or naive to look at the world in that context. Mainly because it's a good barometer, I think, for a person to know when they're being disrespected or when they're being mistreated. A great way to assess that or to evaluate that is if the tables were turned, how would I respond or how would I like someone to respond? And that is usually for me a good indicator as to whether or not this type of situation is on equal footing. And if it's not on equal footing, then I think that's very informative, and it can instruct you as to whether or not this is something that you say want to want to continue in terms of the conversation or the debate or whatever the situation is. You know, I tend to think that the golden rule is a good barometer for human beings. It's just sort of in a general sense. Um, Now, looking at it legislatively, um, I think to the best of our ability, we do legislate decency. I think laws are, if you look at any contract, there's a lot of good faith clauses in contracts, and good faith, I think, is more or less the same thing. It's more or less the presumption that the person you're interacting with is doing their best, and likewise, in your situation, that you are doing your best to fulfill and to meet the needs of a given contract or a given situation. And to me, more or less, that really just equates to the golden rule type of thing, where you know everybody is um, coming to the moment sort of with their best possible foot forward, right? Uh, so to some extent, we do legislate decency, or at least to expect decency. Now, the specificity of what that decency is, I think, nobody can really say. So the idea of legislating pronouns, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that. Um, mm, I don't know. I'm not really. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Like, I don't have a real gut reaction that says don't do it. But then again, listening to Jordan Peterson sort of warn against some of the things that we might take for granted when it comes to legislation and how that legislation becomes an infringement, I think is a fair critique, and it's a fair thing to consider. Um, and that, uh, so it's a fair pushback, so I think it's a worthy debate. Now, beyond that, I think it just, you know, I don't know. I think a lot of this really just emanates from common sense human interaction. Like, first of all, pronouns are not adjectives, right? I think that's a good place to start when you think about language and language use. Um, that pronouns are a system of categorization that is onto itself. Um, I don't think it's meant to be anything except a system of categorization and identifying, or maybe a better way of thinking about it is distinct, creating a categorization in form of distinction, distinguishing between this or that, right? Um, yeah, I really think that's it at the end of the day. I'm not really sure in terms of the complexity of society if I think of this uh, issue as the pressing issue. That said, I'm not a transgender person. I don't live their reality, so I think it's more important. Maybe while I think the pushback is valid, I think it's maybe more important to hear the narrative itself and to see where this legislation is coming from and what is this legislation trying to protect, or trying to nurture. Uh, you know, I think that might be an important thing to consider, which is I think what the lawyer in this debate was trying to articulate. So I think that it's again, it's a worthy thing to explore and to consider. I don't know, uh, I so this idea of not expecting respect, to me, I don't think that that's the strongest argument I've heard from Jordan Peterson in terms of public discourse. Coming from my perspective, um, there's respect and there's respect, right? There's respect that is, I think, um, born out of simply being a human being in consideration of another human being. And born of that respect is the idea that that person has feelings, and that person has a family, and that person has dreams, and is an entire being with an entire lifetime of experience that they bring to the moment. And I think there's respect, sort of born of that truth. That said, I don't think it doesn't mean that you fall down on your knees when you meet a stranger and you're like, oh my God, it's not that. It's just given the criteria of a given situation, how I want a person to treat me is how I will treat them. Full stop, right? Not anything more, not anything less than that. And to me, that's a level of respect. Now, over the course of knowing a person, that respect may grow or that respect may diminish, right? Um, and I think that's just the nature of again, the nature of human interaction, common sense thinking. So uh, I don't think it's too much to ask or too much to expect a certain minimal amount of respect from people that you don't know. I don't think that's strange or crazy or beyond the pale. And I think particularly in any society, but particularly in a society that like a North American society, where we have so many people coming from so many different places in their lives and in the world, I think it is beneficial for us to nurture this basic concept of respect, this basic concept of born of the fact that you are simply human, you are deserving of a certain amount of consideration. I don't think that's crazy. I don't think that that's naive. I don't think that that's anything. I think that that's how I treat the world and how I want the world to treat me. That's not to say that's how the world does treat me. But that's the type of interaction that I myself feel the need to nurture, and so that's what I go into the world with, right? Um, and then I hope that that is something that other people consider worthy in terms of how we interact with each other.